In a library, when we click the Library tab and then choose the Library Settings command, we get to look under the hood of this particular library. At the top, we have its name, its web address, and its description. And then we have three groups of settings: General Settings, Permissions and Management, and Communications. We've already worked with the list name, description, and navigation. I'd like to talk with you about versioning settings. The first question on the versioning settings page is not about versioning itself, but about content approval. Let's imagine that we're working on a draft of a document. We're working on several drafts. That's what this library is used for. And we don't want people to see the drafts. We only want them to see finished versions. And we want to put someone in charge of making sure that the version meets all of the set of criteria that are valid for these documents in our business. What we can do then is we can require content approval for everything that gets submitted. Once an item has been submitted, it will only be visible in the library to people who can approve it and to the authors. If I click on yes, then that's all it takes. By default, the choice is no. And if you'd like to know more about requiring content approval, there's a nice link right here. Only a few of your document libraries will have content approval, but many of them might have versioning. The question is, do you want to create a version each time you edit a file in this document library? And when it says each time you edit, it means each time you edit. SharePoint can't tell the difference between I went and deleted an extra space between two words or I changed 3 paragraphs of text. There's a setting for a file. That setting is actually called dirty, and dirty means it's been changed. And so if any change has been made, even a change that you immediately undid, that's still a changed document. You don't get to say, I'd like a little bit of versioning. You either have versioning when you edit files or you don't have versioning, but there are different versions of versioning that you can choose from. By default, major versioning is on. That's versions 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each time I modify and save a document, or each time I upload a version of that document with the same name, a new version is created. That might mean that version 1 is the original document, version 2 is the version that I saved after I ran spell check, and version 3 might be after some major sweeping changes were made. If you're going to use versioning, I'd like to recommend that you consider using the major and minor draft versions right here. Not the default option, but a great option. Let me show you how this works. With major and minor versioning, each time you save a change to a document, a minor version is created. So I upload or create in place a new document and I save it, and that version is version 1. Then we make some modifications. Numbered version 1.1, make some other modifications, 1.2, 1.3, and this will continue until we get to the point where you say, okay, this looks good. I'd like to make this a major version. Now, a couple of things. One is that the minor versions, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, are not published to people who have viewing rights in the library. These minor versions can actually be hidden, so only the people who are working on them can see them. Let's imagine that this is a policy. Version 1 of the policy stays in place as we are editing. Version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And then we look at version 1.3 and we say, this is good to go. We like this. And we therefore make it a major version. It becomes version 2. There is no version 1.3 anymore. It was turned into version 2. And if we begin editing on this, we'll now have version 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so on. Only the members of your team who are involved in editing see the minor versions. Everyone else sees the major versions. Think about this. SharePoint has 2 different versions at this point. If you are a contributor and can edit versions, you get to work with 2.1. But if you're just a person who goes in to look up policies, you're seeing version 2 because it's the last major version. If you have content approval turned on in the library, then you can say the only people who can see 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 are the users who create those versions and the people who are in an approval role. Not even just users who can contribute, but only the people actually editing the document and the people who can approve it. So I have these choices down below: Draft item security. Who should see the draft items in this document library? Remember, with content approval turned on, the choices are only users who can approve items and the item author. But with content approval not turned on, you have the ability to say any user who can edit items, but the users who can view items only will only get to see the major versions. So minor is draft, major is published. This is a really slick feature because I don't have to have a separate staging area for my drafts. I don't have to take a policy offline to be able to work on it. I can keep it in the same library where people who are using the policy, reading it and applying it in the workplace, have access to it and still be able to edit it. There are some optional choices about the document version history. How many major versions would you like for drafts? And how many major versions in general? These are the default settings that we're seeing here, including that setting right there. And then finally, the last choice is, do we require documents to be checked out before they can be edited? You know how to check documents in and out. If we require checkout, then in this library, we are also saying that we will not be doing any co-authoring. That we have a process in this library where only one person is going to be editing a document at a time, and we want them to check it out before they edit it. The reason all these things are grouped together is that they work together. If I require people to check out documents, and I have content approval on, and I do major and minor drafts and only allow drafts to be visible to authors and approvers, I have a wonderful process for editing policy documents, for editing bylaws, for editing anything that is a reference document that we need to be able to edit while it's in production. I'm going to cancel this to leave, and I'd like to show you a couple of things under permissions and management. First, the first link, delete this document library, does exactly what it says it will do. It will remove that document library totally. It'll be in the recycle bin. Saving a document library as a template, that second command, is an exceptionally brilliant idea. Let's say you have a document library that you would like to include in a number of different sites. Perhaps this is your project startup library. Perhaps this is a library that has a lot of custom columns, and you want to make sure that it is available exactly as you have set it up. If I save this document library as a template, then when I go to create a new app, the document library will be available as a new app that I've created. So this is one way to create a new custom library app inside of SharePoint. This is a really great feature, whether you want to simply save the infrastructure of the library, like the library and the views and the columns, or you want to actually save the documents that are in it. There's one more item under permissions and management that really has to do with versioning, which is that if someone checks a document out and never checks it back in, maybe they go on vacation, or perhaps they leave the company because they win the lottery, you have the ability to manage any files that don't have a checked-in version. That link here is again for people who have the permission to work with versioning and with check-in, check-out. These are frequently modified settings for document libraries. We will come back to libraries once again to work with some of the other settings that are even more advanced. Use the versioning settings, including check-in, check-out, and content approval, to be able to determine how users should interact with your documents in SharePoint. Use the permissions and management settings to be able to create new templates, to delete entire libraries, and to manage the results of documents that are checked out but have not yet been checked back in. To return to our library, simply click this link.